Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Purdy Insurance. Visit Purdy Insurance on Market Street in Sunbury or visit online at purdyinsurance.com.
We're very pleased to be joined by Brad Nessler. Brad, first of all, I hope you've had a good chance to at least relax after everything that you've done the last few months.
Yeah, I have, Steve. It was kind of fun to sit back and watch Raph and Grant and Jim and Tracy, do the games over the weekend. Awesome game, that one in particular, North Carolina Duke. And, it would have been a fairy tale if, Mike would have gone out with another championship. And I think, people that even either loved him or you hated him, but over 42 years you had to respect the legacy of what a great coach he was. And so I was a little bit choked up when the game was over, and I had no reason to be. I don't care who won, but it's just one of those things when you've been around a guy for over 4 decades and done a lot of the North Carolina Duke games, and just to see that last one not quite come out the way the Dukies were hoping for. But for Carolina, got to give them credit, man. I had them 3 months ago, and I said to Bill Raftery when the game was over, I said, they're going to really have to dig deep and find something, or they're not even going to make the tournament.
Right.
And here they are, in the championship game. So got to give Hubert a lot of credit. They've made a lot of progress, man, since I had them back in December.
In fact, that's something I mentioned at the beginning of the show. On the morning of February 17th, they had lost by 20 at Duke on the 5th. They had just lost to Pitt. You and I know that Pitt's not really – it's not the golden era of Pitt basketball at the moment.
Right.
They had one quad one win. On February 17th, Brad, they probably weren't in the tournament, let alone in the bubble. That's how remarkable this has been.
Yeah, it's unbelievable because, Kentucky just tore them apart in the game I had. And that, I don't look at December games and really take much credence in what happens then because a lot of teams haven't developed. But they were really not good at all. And then Josh Paterno down here, the Georgia Tech coach, came out about late February when everybody was questioning whether the ACC was any good or it was a down year. Duke was right around in there, was like the only team ranked. They were in the top 10, and there was nobody else in sight. And he said at the time, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution did a question and answer with him or something, and he said, down year for the ACC, huh? He goes, said, man, I think Duke's really good. And then he said, and I think North Carolina's really good, and it wouldn't shock me if they both ended up in the Final Four. And I read that article, and I was like, Josh, what is wrong with you, dude? And it's pretty prophetic. I think he knows a little more about basketball than I do. But anyway, I looked back on that, and I kind of chuckled, and I was going to text him today and say, hey, dude, you were right on it, So just amazing. I don't know how teams – it takes a while to gel, and I get it. And with the transfer portal and all that stuff, I don't think they knew what they had in Brady Manick yet. He comes over from Oklahoma and, got the beard and the hair that looks like he's a lumberjack or whatever, and started watching him. I don't even know he played that much. He must have played in that game that I had, but, all of a sudden he's draining three-pointers all over the place, and it's just – it's amazing. The Baylor game was unbelievable. The Duke game, to get them where they are, was unbelievable. Really good hoops. But, Steve, what's weird, you and I talked about this before, this was the year everybody was convinced that it was going to be some outlier team, that comes out of nowhere. And, yeah, we had St. Peter's, and Miami went farther than we expected and all of that. But we get down to the nitty-gritty, and we got 2 of the 3 winningest programs in college basketball history. So there you go. Yeah. We're right back where we started, right?
Well, but then the other 2 were Villanova, which has won 2 recently, and Duke. It was about as blue blood it gets, with the exception of not maybe having Kentucky around.
Yeah, exactly. And the Kansas Villanova winner in the last 5 years, whoever won that game has won the title, be it Villanova or Kansas or the last few times they've met, at least in the Final Four. And it's been 14 years, I guess, since Bill won the last one. But we're right back to having blue blood, and it's great. I mean, it would have been fun, I guess, if St. Peter's would have gone all the way. I think people would have loved that story, and that's great. But it's kind of like in the NFL or college football or whatever, the teams that you expect to be good. When they're good, it's fun to watch them, and these two are good.
You know, it's interesting in what we get to do. We get to talk to a lot of people, which means in turn, one of the important parts of what we do is listening to people. In listening to Mike Krzyzewski over the years, what did you take from him that gave you a perspective, not just on college basketball, but gave you a perspective on sports, just listening to him?
You know, when you're around guys like that, it's kind of like, well, you and I have been around this guy, God rest his soul. But when I was around Joe Pa,
yep.
I don't know if we ever talked football more than 5 minutes. You know, we talked about everything else. I don't know if it was politics or family life or kids or grandkids. And when I was around Bobby Bowden, I did the same thing. I'd talk football for 5 minutes, and I'd talk about everything else for a long time. And that's kind of the way it was with Mike, I think, you know, with me. We talked basketball for a while, and then just hearing him and listening to him and his philosophy on coaching, on being a father figure, you know, what the kids meant to him, all the guys that he coached. You know, even as crazy as Bob Knight was, I would do the same thing with him. You know, we'd sit around and talk about fishing and hunting and all kinds of stuff. And he'd throw me out of practice on purpose, which was always fun. He always told me it was coming. He said, watch this, you know, and he'd go out and he'd chew his team out. And then he'd say, Nessler, get your ass out of my practice. And it kind of became this cool routine, you know, because he'd say, just hang in there and don't worry about what I'm about to say to you. And I'm like, okay, I got it. And so, I mean, all those guys, to be around legendary coaches is just, you know, something that we sometimes take for granted. And then we look back, you know, in the back half of our broadcast careers and go, hey, geez, we got to sit down with these guys all the time and talk about things that wasn't sports related. And how cool is that? So I think that would probably be me with Mike. I mean, 42 years ago, we sat down on a folding table down at Old Alexander Memorial Coliseum when it was one of the worst basketball facilities in the world. And his Duke team was in there to practice, and Georgia Tech was a horrible team, and Duke wasn't very good either at that time because, you know, first 3 years they're about ready to run Mike out of Durham, you know. But Georgia Tech was awful because Bobby Cremins hadn't showed up yet. So we sat down there and we're at a shoot-around, and I said, Mike, I got to ask you a question. I'm kind of new at this. I'm on the Georgia Tech radio broadcast. I just literally moved here, and I just want to ask you one question. He said, anything. And I said, just pronounce your last name for me, would you please? And I said, when he told me, I said, all right, Mike, I promise I'll never forget how to pronounce it, but I know I'll never be able to spell it. So we always had that funny conversation going every time we saw each other for 42 years, you know. Kind of weird.
But you know what? But it's interesting you say that, because when I talked to Mike, we talked about leadership. The number, and you talk with Joe, I mean, the thousands of times I talked to Joe, literally.
Yeah.
So it's always about other things besides. Everybody thought, okay, so when you blitz on third down, that doesn't come up. I mean, you end up talking to them as people, but you learn, because they're in a leadership position, what it means to do what they do in a wide variety of areas.
Right. And then, and you know better than anybody, the memory that Joe had was just phenomenal. And we were in Chicago for, I think, when the Big Ten Network first started or something. We were up there for some reason. And it's the first time he met my wife. And so he met Nancy, and she was talking to him about all kinds of different things. And everybody else just backed away from him. All the coaches, the athletic directors, everybody just stayed clear. And it was like, well, just leave Nessler's wife alone, because Joe Pa is talking with her about something. And every time after that, when I would see him, the first thing he would say was, hey, Nessler, how's Nancy? I don't care about you, but how's your wife? God, she's a beautiful redhead. I love that girl. And, you know, so, I mean, it's just fun to look back on stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't care about you. I always love that one. I don't care about you. How's Nancy doing? How's Kathy doing? It's like, okay, great. The game tonight, obviously, Kansas plays North Carolina. As you mentioned, two of the three winningest programs ever. Just a couple things you might be looking for tonight.
I hope that neither one of the big guys get in foul trouble. That would I think that would change the course of the game immensely. Armando Bacot has just been unbelievable rebounding, and he's getting better on offense. He's even getting better as a free throw shooter, and he's really become a force. And I don't know, could have been last year. I just look at it and I think we haven't had two legitimate 7-foot guys that are kind of old school centers, playing in the championship game. We've had so many, 4 out and 1 in, and a bunch of 6'7" guys that are long and all that kind of stuff. And Timmy was 6'10" or 6'11" for Gonzaga, but he's not a center. These guys are centers, so it's going to be kind of fun to watch those guys banging. And I hope neither one of them gets in foul trouble, because McCormick's become an offensive force that he really wasn't during the course of the season, and I think Bacot's come as far as anybody. And then, Agbaji's got to kind of take over, I think, if Kansas is going to win. He doesn't call his own number enough. He's almost too selfless. All of that. And when he's a first-team All-American. He should score 25. And that's what Caleb Love's been doing. And like I already mentioned, Brady Manick hitting 3-pointers, R.J. Davis. I think Carolina's got one more guy. I don't know why I think that. I just think they got one more guy at one position, wherever it may be, because everybody kind of swings around and plays, small forward or big guard or whatever. And then there's the two big guys. And if they don't get in foul trouble, I think it's going to be an awesome game. But I don't know. Those are that's a whole bunch of nothing, I guess. But it's some really good guys that have to take over for the game to make a difference. And I could see Manick having 30 points, if they don't find out where the redhead is. He might be the difference. But I just hope the two 7-footers I want to see one guy get 2 fouls in the first 6 minutes of the game. That's going to screw everything up.
Right, exactly. And by the way, a whole bunch of nothing. You just described the theme of the show. All right, so.
Well, whatever. I don't know that much, but I'm just watching now. This is fun tonight. I mean, this is gravy, just watching these guys.
That's all I'm doing is putting my feet up and watching and just relaxing and enjoying it. So there are enough other days where I got to be fully invested. So
no doubt,
like
absolutely.
Hey. It's great to talk to you.
I wish I didn't have the rule that I don't drink on Mondays, because I'd have about 6 years while I watch this game. But I don't drink on Mondays, so I'm just going to have to sit back with a Diet Coke and enjoy.
Okay. I'm trying to think, though. I think it's by the time the game tips off, it'll be Monday in London. All right, so.
maybe in the post game. About time Tracy's talking to the winning coach.
That's right. That sounds good. Brad, always great. Thanks so much for your time. Always appreciate you, my friend.
All right, buddy. Let's enjoy it tonight, Steve. I'll talk to you soon, man.